hello to all of our listeners again. We are so excited to have you here. Just a quick one from us. If you haven't already followed us on Spotify, Amazon or YouTube, please just quickly click off and click follow. You can also always leave us a review as well. We would be really, really grateful so that we can reach as many teachers as we possibly can. So today's episode, we are so excited. Today we are joined by Katie, who is an early years foundation stage and special educational needs specialist. Katie shares play ideas and developmental information for both of these categories through her beautifully engaging Instagram called The Magic of Early Years. Not only is Katie a teacher, she is a wonderful mummy who believes in the power of Makaton. Today, we are going to explore these areas with Katie. So without further ado, welcome Katie. Today, we are going to start off our podcast with a WWW, which is a what went well, and then an EBI, which is an even better if. So first of all, what is your what went well for this week?
So this week was my first week back after the 2-week Easter break. And usually it's just always a bit of a rush, getting back into the swing of things, a bit foggy. But actually I feel like this week was really well, and I'm wondering whether it's that false sense of hope and next week's going to be a nightmare, but that's fine. So I feel like we were just all ready to be back in school, myself, my staff, my students, my own children. And it's that whole, we've gone into summer term, so everything's new topic, just new beginnings, and it's quite positive as well, and it's that countdown to summer as well. So I just feel like it went really well, and everyone was sort of ready for that next step in the journey and the learning, and we really enjoyed it.
Oh, amazing. It's so nice when that first week back is actually really positive, isn't it? It makes you feel so much better and so much more positive about going into the rest of the term. So I'm so glad that was really good for you. So I suppose then next, what's your even better if? So if your really positive week could have gone even better, what would it have been?
A bit of a silly one, but if the weather was better. So we're going into summer term, and obviously I've got early years neurodivergent children, and we want to do really summery things like looking at flowers, going on bug hunts, having a pool party, getting the paddling pools out. And the sun was out, but it was 3 degrees, and we're all there going on a bug hunt with our bobble hats and our gloves on in April. And I was just a bit like, if the weather was a bit better, this would be a bit more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we make do what difficult. We
can. We do just do what we can. We've had the same thing this week. I mean, we're in secondary and we're not going outside doing all those fun things yet, but I do like to get the kids outside, especially when we're teaching biology topics. But even our classrooms this week have been cold, and we're all like, we just need it to be hot now. We're all bored of being cold.
Absolutely. You just get to a point where, your body can't warm up and your brain's just focusing so much on trying to stay warm, and you just want to be inside and you don't want to be in the soggy rain, despite how much waterproofs and wellies and whatever you've got on. But a little bit of warmth, because the sunshine's beautiful, but you're in a bobble hat and sunglasses and it's confusing.
Yeah, when sorry, my voice has gone. I've been about 2 weeks already and my voice has gone. I totally understand. So we have in senior school, we've had a lot of wet breaks, and it's really hard for the teachers. So I'm not sure how it works in primary schools, junior schools, but if it's wet break and lunch, the teachers don't get a single break in the day. So they will be with the kids from 8:30 in the morning till 4 p.m. And it's actually really hard to not have a single minute, apart from when you manage to like squeeze in and go into the toilet. Like you just don't get the time. So it is quite challenging in so many different ways when it's not good weather, which typically in the UK it's not. As a senior school teacher, secondary school teacher, I'd love to hear sort of what a typical day looks like for you. Could you walk us through your day?
Yeah, of course. So like you said before, I am a mum. My kids get up maybe around 4:30, 5 a.m. They're early risers. So my day starts around about them because we have that big gap in the morning where we don't leave the house till 7:30. So we'll have a bit of chill time, sort of adjust ourselves. But we might even just start a little bit of homework or do our daily reading because my children are primary school age. So I'm kind of already in that role of teacher mum from about 5 a.m. So that pretty much starts our day. And then when I drop the kids off and get to work, so I'll set up my classroom, set up my continuous provision, my TAs will be there, we'll liaise about things that are going on through the day. We might even sort of go over some behaviour plans or some what went well from the day before or vice versa, some adjustments. The children come in about 5 to 9. We have half an hour of what we call a sensory start because again, I am with neurodivergent children. So they come into us and before we even do anything structured, we have to regulate them and get them into the frame of mind and get them into a physical state, an emotional state of readiness for learning. So we'll do some sort of sensory input, maybe some massage, some calming activities, and then we're ready to start our day, which would be like a group, a structured group activity, maybe sort of like hello song, days of the week, very sort of early years. This is what's happening. Let's check our visual timetables for the day, set up that expectations, and then it would be a series of structured activities throughout the day. We have quite a high staff ratio because of the level of support the children need. So at the moment, I have 9 or 10 children with 6 staff. I say 9 or 10 because we're in the middle of kind of like moving cohorts around as new starters come in. So our activities would be very short, snappy activities based on the needs of the children. And I think I've done similar things in early years mainstream, but as a SEN specialist, at the moment it is things like maybe a multi-sensory story, engaging all of those senses. Last week we did bear hunt. And again, it's sort of like engaging all of those senses, either all at once or individualized. So we look at smell, we'd look at different things, sight, tracking objects, things to taste, and really engage in all of that. We'd also do structured activities such as like a story massage or massage for relaxation, something called sensology, which again is all about engaging our senses and understanding what part of our body uses those senses, and building up tolerance as well. So if I've got a lot of children that either are tactile tolerant or tactile avoidant, it builds up those exposure in a safe environment. We do a lot of sort of active play. I have children that love to climb, so we set up sort of obstacle courses. I've got climbing bars in my classroom, so that they're constantly working that proprioceptive sense as well. And we have like those brain breaks. If I'm expecting them to really engage in something, then they'll either need something to have that brain break, and it's very physical. What else do I do? Let me see. We do lots of things like yoga. We do lots of sort of precision teaching as well. So I'll do one-to-one working on what you guys would probably know as IEPs. We call them personal learning outcomes, and that all comes from the educational healthcare plan. So every child has an individualized plan, and I would lead that, whether it's a one-to-one activity, which is very structured, or I incorporate into like a big group, maybe like play-based maths kind of things. And we do lots of things through continuous provision as well. And everything we do, we incorporate some form of communication and language. So my cohort at the moment are non-verbal. So I have to constantly think, does this child have a voice right now? And if the answer is no, it's my job to provide them with a voice, whether it's visual, whether it's signing, or gestural, whatever their level is. And I've got children that are varying levels of communication. So it's tailoring it as well to make sure that they can communicate their wants, their needs, and enable them to comment on things as well. So it's very active. I don't sit down all day. Probably get about 20 minutes break in the middle of the day, and I'm probably shoving a sandwich in my mouth while I'm setting up my next activity for the day. So like you said before, when it is wet play and things like that, if they're not out of my classroom for me to set up for the afternoon, it is really difficult. You're stepping over children while you're trying to set up the next activity, or the mystery of the next activity is gone because they've watched you set it up. But yeah, it's very active. I'm on my feet all the time, so I do burn a lot of calories to get my steps in, but I love it.
It's so inspiring to listen to you. We're so rigid in secondary school in terms of our lessons. For example, they have to be 55 minutes, and you have to cover a certain amount of content within each lesson, and that's across all subjects. So in terms of flexibility, it's really, really challenging, and you want to meet the needs of all the kids in the classroom, but it is really hard with such a rigid structure. So it's so inspiring listening to you and how you approach neurodivergent children. It's so inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
What time of day do the children leave the school? And when do you have time, obviously, to be with your children?
My children or my students?
Your children.
We leave the house at 7:30. I drop them off at sort of like the wraparound care at 7:45. Then I head straight to school, and then I pick them up from wraparound on my way home. So any time between 4:30 and 5:30, I collect them from school, and then after school, I always make sure at that point, once I'm at home, I am mum. So schoolwork goes away, and I spend those 2-3 hours with my children. We'll play, we'll do homework, we might just chill out. When the weather is nice, we'll take the dog for a walk. And I make sure that I've just got that time for them. And then we start bedtime around about 7ish. And then once they're in bed, I'll either do some more schoolwork, or that's where me and my husband just get to veg out and see who falls asleep first in front of the TV.
I think we all do that every night.
I've had to work quite a lot on my work-life balance as well, and over the last year I've developed a system where I kind of timetable myself. So I'll do like 3 nights a week where I'll work once the children are in bed, and then the other nights I make sure that I spend time with my husband, or I do just get an early night or whatever. It's been really hard to do that. You can imagine yourself as a teacher, the workload is massive, but you could spend every waking minute doing it. But I just had to make sure that I was getting sleep, and I was making sure that I wasn't just coming home and my children were just seeing me working, or I wasn't staying up till all hours. So I've tried really hard to structure that, and it seems to be going well so far.
It's something that I really struggled with when I first started teaching, because you could spend so long planning one activity or one hours. It could always be better, and you could always give more, but you do have to learn that balance, and it's different for everyone. Learn that balance of input to output. So I think everyone goes through that, and as life changes, when you do have children, you become a mum, that balance will change again. So you're constantly evolving as a teacher. We have something in senior school, secondary school, called PPA, so personal planning time. Do you get that as a junior school teacher?
Yeah. As a teacher, we still get our allocated 10%, which I think works out as like half a day. So what we do is, in my school, we get a full day every fortnight, which was a bit of an adjustment at first, because it's a big jump to the next one. But once you get into the swing of it, I did find that having a full day to do things was a lot more productive than sort of only doing like 3 hours here or 2 hours there, or so it just means planning way ahead and making sure that we're getting like resources ready in between and things like that. But yeah, we definitely get PPA. I'm communication and interaction lead teacher in my school as well, so I also get extra allocated management time, which is rated by SLT and amongst the middle leaders. So I can't complain really. My school's really good with giving you the time you need to be able to do what you need to do.
So just so it's really clear to our listeners, you get half an hour per week to plan. Is that correct?
Half a day.
Half a day per
Yeah.
week. And how many activities do you think you do across that week that you have to plan?
Wow. Again, because my timetable is quite short and snappy, I could do up to 7 activities or 7 lessons in a day, every day. Now, a lot of those activities would be repeated because of the learning styles of my students. We might need to teach something 3, 4, 5, 10 times before it starts to make those sort of brain connections and transforms into the long-term memory, and they're able to generalize that skill. So I might plan a story session, and I'll do that story session every single day, but it might be the same thing every single day. So, or it might be the same thing but with a variant. So even though I'm planning 7 activities a day, a lot of them are sort of, revisited and repeated or just slightly adapted. So it's not as bad as it sounds, but yeah, it is a lot. It's because I'm planning for their academics and I've still got to cover maths, phonics, understanding of the world, all of those early years topics as well. But then I'm also looking at the EHCP areas. So I'm getting in independence and self-help. So all my children have sort of toilet training and personal care regimes. So every day we're looking at like brushing their teeth, nappy changes, toilet training, things like dressing themselves, crossing a road, washing their hands. That's all part of our activities. So I'm doing independence and self-help on top of my academics and the speech and language interventions, and then obviously the sensory integration. So a lot of it kind of repeats itself as well. But it's that constant assessing what went well today. Does this need adapting? Did that work? What can I do instead? So
it's so admirable. It isn't an easy job. Sorry, my voice. So teaching, it's so admirable. So thank you so much for sharing. You can see that it shines through you. You're so passionate about this. I was just curious, is this always the area that you've worked in? Have you always worked with neurodivergent children?
Yes and no. I started working in sort of like play schemes, like summer schemes, holiday clubs, holiday camps, when I was about 16, 17. I volunteered for about 4 summers consecutively, working with a range of children from age 4 to up to age 19, doing sort of like play schemes. And I really enjoyed it. At that point, I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. I was, doing my A-levels and thinking about what I wanted to do as an undergrad. So they've always been there, but again, it kind of found me rather than me making a choice to go, oh, as a child growing up, I never had any interactions with neurodivergent people. So it was new to me, but it was something that I thought was interesting, and I felt like I had a nice bond with the children, and it turns out I was good at it, so I carried on doing it. And then when I was about 20, they put me on their payroll and offered me a job, and I did it then for a few years. And then I actually went into mainstream teaching. I did early years mainstream for a few years. And then after I had my oldest child, I just decided I want to go to SEN. SEN was where my head was at. And yourself, you have those children within a mainstream cohort that are on the register or need extra support, and I just felt myself drawn to those children all the time. And they were the ones that I put all, most of my heart and my soul and my energy in. I just couldn't help but be drawn to them. So I thought, let's go to SEN. Let's go to where I can sort of pour all that all the time, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, so I had a similar experience. I was just drawn to those pupils. I worked in mainstream schools, and it was always just the area that I was drawn to. And I kind of knew deep down that that's what I wanted. So that's when I obviously went back to university again for like the third time and did my Senko qualification. I was just drawn to them. I think for me, it was based on my own diagnosis of dyslexia, and then really close family members of mine, they've also had ADHD diagnosis as well. So it was just within me, I think, to be drawn to these kids, especially ones that were undiagnosed, because myself, I was undiagnosed throughout the education system, and I saw the negative implications of that as a result. And I was just drawn to it naturally. I actually am not familiar with this at all, because it's not something that really comes up, but I would love to explore Makaton. If you could explain to our listeners what it is, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Makaton it's a unique language program that uses symbols with signs and speech to enable people to communicate more effectively. It's different from BSL and ASL and things like that in terms of BSL is for the deaf community. It's their language, which has its own grammar skills, and it's a recognized language. Makaton is a recognized language, but it's more about signing keywords and supporting speech. So you'd use Makaton, but you'd still talk, and it's very important that you talk alongside the signs. But it's a really, really useful tool for attention and listening, comprehension, memory recall, and language expression as well. I started looking into it when I had my own children. I did the baby classes, and we did like a baby sign, sing and sign. And I really noticed in my own children, who at the time were neurotypically developing, and I realised that it helped with that sort of like communication frustration, when you've got a baby or a toddler who can probably comprehend more than they can express. And you see those kinds of meltdowns and those toddler tantrums more because they can't get their voice across. So I started looking into it then, and then I've developed it within my career. And I use it a lot now with my complex needs students. Like I said, all my students are non-verbal. So I'll pretty much sign along to everything I'm saying throughout the day, hoping that gestural language will help them to understand what I'm saying. So they can't understand the verbal instruction, but they can understand it alongside a sign and a symbol. And it just sort of helps that comprehension a little bit more. It's like you go out to a restaurant, and if the menu doesn't always have pictures on, you question it a little bit more. Whereas if it's got pictures on, it helps you sort of choose or go, oh, that's what that means. It's having that visual understanding and really being a visual learner. But yeah, the benefit to Makaton means that because we're signing keywords, it helps with those important life skills, because communication is everything we do. If you can't communicate what you want to eat, what you want to drink, if you need the toilet, your quality of life is going to be pretty rubbish. So the signs and symbols just help that vocabulary. It can widen vocabulary. It can be expressive. It can also be receptive. And it just depends. You can adapt it to the needs of your student. I've got a student at the moment who is starting to copy my signs, so we're encouraging that a bit more. His precision isn't great, so so for instance, like if I was to do more, and I know on a podcast you can't see me, but if I was to do more, he might sort of flap his hands instead of doing a closed fist and a palm, and it's understanding he's saying this, and responding to his attempt at communicating. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's not an alternative to speech, but the idea is that it's used in conjunction, and it is a series of hand gestures, recognised hand gestures by the Makaton charity. So they set the signs, and it is recognised in the communicative world. And they have their own set of symbols as well, which are just sort of like line drawings, and them alongside the sign. Again, just helps expression and comprehension.
Out of interest, is there advice from Makaton about how often parents should expose their children to practicing Makaton?
It's just regular exposure. The Makaton charity would recommend, as much exposure as possible, depending on the child. I always start off with sort of like core vocabulary. So that's things that they can use in any context. So, hello, goodbye, help, food, cuddle, things that they can, meet their basic needs. And then you can go off on a tangent and mix that with topics. You could, if they can sign, I want something to eat, you can easily meet your baby's needs or your child's needs. And then you might branch that off into to sort of expose them to what do you want to eat. Do you want a biscuit? Do you want a cake? Do you want some fruit? And just completely exposing them. So I think exposure over trying to get them to reciprocate as much as possible, because it has to be on their terms. Some children take to it, some children don't, and that's absolutely fine. There's lots of other communication systems out there that you can sort of expose them to, but with Makaton it's constant exposure in context, and that's what the Makaton charity would advocate, that it is as contextualized as possible. There's no point signing cake if cake isn't available.
Is it something that is recommended from a research perspective in early years? So when you have CPD regarding early years contexts, and especially SEN context, is Makaton something that's actively recommended from the research, or is it something that you have just seen as being really effective? Just wondering if it's an education thing that is recommended, or if it's parents have seen it works and then have implemented it.
Both. Makaton has sort of taken off over the last few years, obviously with the likes of Mr. Tumble and research. Research underpins with Makaton. So I've seen it in my own sort of day-to-day profession. So I started at my school when they didn't use Makaton, and we've progressed it over the years, and we've sort of been on that journey to see how much it is benefiting our students. It's not part of our core curriculum in terms of the government say you have to do Makaton, or Makaton is recommended, but it is something that if there's a need for it within a school, I know some mainstream schools are taking it on as well, because the rise in SEN children and non-verbal children coming through, especially within the early years. I'm the Centrelink governor on my children's school board, and the rise coming through early years is quite significant. So they are looking at those proven strategies like Makaton, and other communication interventions to support those children. So to answer your question, no, it's not something that schools are told to do, but the research is there and it is justifiable. There is something called the Makaton friendly status as well, so schools can work towards a Makaton friendly status to say, we are a Makaton friendly school and it's embedded in everything we do. And that's like an award that you can work towards, and it's got different stages like bronze, silver, gold. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Looking back at my mainstream early years, I think if I had done that then, even for the neurotypical children, it's another tool in your belt to help that expression. Even as adults, I think I've done it during this recording, that sometimes you just can't get your words out, and then you start flapping your hands about. But if you had a sign that you could, or something that you could go, I can use my gestures to try and help me explain this. Me and my colleagues quite often joke, like when we get teacher lurgy and we lose our voice, we just stop signing to each other.
Mm.
It's just easier.
I really do think we're at the early stages of Makaton, and I feel like I'd love to see 10 years into the future and where we're at, because I feel like we're just at the early stages. If parents are listening and they're really resonating with things that you're saying, where would you advise that they go and look and find out about Makaton? Where would you be your best advice?
Definitely straight to the Makaton charity website. It is a copyright system. They do lots and lots of training for parents, for teachers, for emergency services as well. They have a program that they roll out through the police and the fire departments. But because it's copyright, I do have to say go to the Makaton charity. There are a lot of people like myself who do Makaton tutorials on YouTube, on Instagram. Just make sure that you're getting your signs from a reputable source and that they're Makaton trained. And there's a lot of different systems out there as well. Like I said, a lot of the YouTube videos for like songs and things, it could be American Sign Language. So, you're going to be using different signs. Or there's another system called Sign Along, which is very, very similar, but there might be the odd sign that's different. So if you are wanting to use Makaton, please go to a reputable source. But
yeah, I think that's really important. I was doing sign with one of my pupils last week, and she had lived in America for a bit, and also obviously lives now here, and it was completely different, the different signs. And it wasn't until I really sat down with her and was going through that process that I realised actually this is quite challenging, having the two completely different signs.
Yeah.
Great. So parents should go straight to the Makaton website and then just make sure that if they are going online on social media, which we all do these days, just make sure you're going to do.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
If you're in touch with your local speech and language service as well, there might be somebody within that service that is Makaton trained, or can direct you to somebody who is Makaton trained that will provide parental support as well.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you. And my final question for you is, what's the best bit of advice you've ever had? And please, could you share it with our listeners?
Of course. This is something that I do always actually take a step back and rethink about all the time. It's a little bit corny, but I am early years and I am special needs. So really thinking that the children I work with are, they're coming to me at the ages of 2, 3, 4, and they're nonverbal and they are, very special in the way that we sort of approach them, or whether they're mainstream or not. At the end of the day, that's somebody's baby. So when I was early years mainstream and I started, I always remember a teacher saying to me, treat these children as if they're yours. And I didn't have children at the time, so that was quite hard for me. But as a mother, it's something that I always keep thinking about, like teach these children as if they're yours. And I think I'd probably apply that into higher up the school and in secondary as well, because that's somebody's baby, that's somebody's child. If that was your child, would you want somebody to brush them off, or somebody to take that extra time to help them understand that concept that they don't understand, or that they're struggling with? Or if they are having sort of sensory issues, or they're in crisis, would you want somebody to respond to them in a way that you would if they were yours? If that was my child, how would I want a practitioner to treat them? How would I want a practitioner to approach them, or just give them a chance, or give them a time of day, or differentiate a task to help them sort of see it in a better way that they understand? So it's a bit corny, but I always kind of step back and think, right, if that was my child, what would I want somebody to do? Because you drop your children off at daycare, at school, and you want somebody to love them the way that you love them, maybe in a more appropriate way, because sometimes they can get away with a bit more with a parent, but you still want them to be nurtured in the right way. So I always give that advice to other people, and I always sort of reflect on it myself as well and take a step back, because teaching's stressful, and my job's really busy, and sometimes my cup can be full, and I just think am I the right person to deal with this right now? Would I want my child to be supported by somebody who wasn't able to support themselves? Do I need a change of face? Can I ask somebody else? You know, in all of those situations, I think I want the best person for my child, so I want the best person for this child.
I think that's so important, and a phrase that I think actually every teacher should be reflecting on every day. And like you say, teaching is so stressful, and sometimes we're faced with multiple difficult scenarios within 30 seconds, and it's reflecting very quickly on, right, how am I going to deal with these 5 difficult scenarios within the next minute, which actually make sure I am focusing on the needs of every one of these children in the appropriate manner. And if that means that we need to call for support so that we've got each of those child being treated in the way that they deserve to be treated, is really, really important. But I think with that comes communication within your schools, communications with your TAs, so that everyone's on a really respectful level, and the children know that also that you're trying your best to do the best for them. And sometimes, like you say, sometimes that won't be you. Sometimes it's really important for us to go, actually, I'm not the one to deal with this right now, because I know, like you said, my cup is full, but I do know that the TA that you get on really well with can deal with this really well.
Yeah.
And sending them in that direction. Or I know for secondary school, we do so we've got an emergency call out where we can get someone from the pastoral team to come and talk to a child or remove a child for whatever reason it may be. Sometimes it's just that one child needs a 2-minute conversation outside with a pastoral member they trust, and then they can return to the classroom. We've got no negative blood, I suppose, no negative blood between us. They come back in, I'm happy and calm, they're happy and calm. And like you say, at the end of the day, they've been treated in the best way possible, as if they're your own child. So really, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really one that should resonate with all teachers.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to listen to you and see your passion for all of this shine through. It's been great. Where can the listeners find you?
So I'm currently on Instagram and Facebook, just at the magic of early years. And yeah, and like you said before, that's where all my play ideas are, my Makaton tutorials, and I share some research of my own and from others, just on the things that we've spoken about today. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honour, and it's been nice to have a chat with like-minded teachers. So thank you so much, both of you.